Hey gamers, what's up? Today I'm going to do a quick video and talk about collecting and the video game market in general and the impact that gamers and collectors have on the market itself. I've gotten a lot of comments, and most recently I got a comment that said collectors are killing gaming along with their inflated prices. I get lots of comments like that, and it's kind of funny. So I thought I would talk about it, and I've talked about this in the past. I even had a debate about it once. And I thought this was something that would be interesting to bring up again and talk about and maybe get your opinions too. So if you have a comment, please leave it below. And before I do start, like this video if you like it, and be sure to subscribe. Follow me on Twitter at L1Games and hit that bell icon and you'll get updates for future videos. But getting right into this, the overall theme here is that there are people out there who say collectors destroy gaming and collecting by inflating the price of video games somehow, that they sell them for more than they're worth, or that they affect the value of games by keeping them. I've heard both arguments. Now, one of the first things worth mentioning is that you do have less expensive options to play games. You have emulation and digital distribution. That covers a vast majority of retro gaming. So I don't understand how anyone could complain about the price of games that are readily available for them to play at any time. If they're real gamers and they just want to play the game, this is a solid, viable option. Now, having said that, you got to start off by understanding that physical games have an inherent value that, say, digital games don't have. They are a physical product, they are produced and they're made from materials, they're true physical pieces of video game history, and you have true ownership of them. When I say true ownership, I mean you can do with them as you please. You can sell them, trade them, loan them, give them to a friend, whatever you want to do, they're yours to give, whereas a digital copy of a game doesn't offer you the same true ownership. In fact, when you click that EULA agreement, every single time you buy something digitally, you're basically saying you don't own the game. With that physical ownership and that true ownership comes a certain amount of value. And saying something is too expensive, first of all, is kind of a subjective quantification, right? You can't just say that's too expensive in general, because it might be too expensive to you, but maybe not too expensive to someone else for a multitude of reasons. Maybe they just think it's worth paying that for, or maybe they have an excessive amount of disposable income, whatever the case may be in that situation. Too expensive is totally subjective. Expensive just means a lot of money. But what you view as a lot of money may not be the same as what I consider a lot of money. So you can only say something's overpriced in relation to what the market is averaging at the time of its sale. The seller doesn't dictate that price. The market does. And what drives the market is supply and demand. So if you want to blame someone for prices, you have to go back. You have to blame developers and publishers for putting out great games, and then you have to blame them for maybe not printing enough of them, because the lower the supply and the higher the demand, the more valuable a game is, right? And this holds true for anything. It's not just video games. This is anything that you might find collectible. And you can't really blame game developers for not printing a lot of games, because when they're printing a game, they have to look at who their potential market is, how many they think they'll sell, and they'll do an initial production run. Then they base those sales on whether they do another print or not. In some games, they never get a second printing, whatever. But if the company were to produce, you know, let's say there are 1 million of this game console sold, game console X, and you're releasing a game on it, and you say make 500,000 copies. Well, that's just ridiculous. That's actually what Atari did in the 80s with E.T. and Pac-Man. They printed more copies of the game than there were consoles to play them on. That's a failing model. It doesn't work. In fact, one of the most popular games of all time, of course, would be Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. And that game only sold to about, I think, 17% of the installed base of the PS2. You know, every time, say, Capcom, for example, makes a game and it's successful, well, that's more money they can invest into the next game. And maybe they've put so much money into all these other projects, they're budgeted, that they decide it's not worthwhile to print another run of this game. So, you know, that's just life. That's how it is. And that feeds into the whole supply and demand system of economics and dictates the value of a game down the road. Next up, I guess you'd have to blame eBay and Amazon and every other marketplace that gives shoppers an even ground on which to shop. So here's this great marketplace where everyone can get together, and basically this marketplace itself can dictate the value of a game by showing what it sells for and what it doesn't sell for. As an example, let's say I wanted to list a copy of Call of Duty Modern Warfare. I put it on for $1,000. It's never going to sell. But if I put it on for $1, it sells immediately. And in between there is a market value that the consumer finds acceptable and is willing to pay for it. So as an example, Modern Warfare spiked in value when it became backwards compatible. Why did that happen? Well, because now there was a new console that played it and people could go back and enjoy the experience again. It became more in demand, even though there's plenty of supply. That is just proof positive that the market dictates the value of games, because gamers aren't running around saying this game is worth a fortune. It was mass produced. And generally speaking, games that are mass produced never really go up in value. And the same thing seemed to happen with GameCube games. GameCube games were produced for a console that only sold 22 million units. Then the Wii came out, and they sold 100 more million units of the Wii, and the Wii plays GameCube games. So now you have 122 million game consoles that can play games for a console that only sold 22 million units. So the production runs of GameCube games was much lower. But there's an excess of consoles that play them, and a lot of people want them. And a lot of people now have the option to play them if they have a Wii sitting around, and there are a lot of Wiis sitting around. So something to consider. That raises the demand, and the price for games go up. Meanwhile, the price of the GameCube itself probably will never go through the roof, because GameCube games can be played on the Wii, and there are so many units that can play them. Just like the price of the PS1 is never really going to go up through the roof, because the PS1, the PS2, and the PS3, which total over, 300 million units, can all play PS1 games. So the market is actually oversaturated with consoles that play PS1 games. Why would the PS1 ever become super valuable? And the same thing holds true for games that were released in Japan and America, but released in greater number in Japan and smaller quantity in America. You have Snatcher and Panzer Dragoon Saga and many other games that were all produced in great numbers there and aren't worth a whole lot of money, but in America they're skyrocketing in price because they're rare here. Okay, so this is how it works. Eventually a game hits the market years after its release. I'm willing to pay $10, you're willing to pay $20, some other guy's willing to pay $30, and so on. But then it reaches a level where no one's just willing to pay, say, $60 for it. And that is how the market dictates the value of a game. The collector doesn't dictate the value, the seller doesn't dictate the value, the people who buy it dictate the value. And you can't really quantify a statement like collectors are ruining gaming with their inflated prices, or that you can't say that collectors are raising prices, because you can't say who's buying and who's selling these games. Could be gamers, could be anyone else. There's a multitude of people who would buy or sell games online, and that's people who had the games when they were a kid and they grew up and now they're getting rid of them. That's collectors, yes. That's also resellers. That's people who want to invest in games. That's gamers who just want to play the game and plan on selling it down the road. But it's not all just collectors, and whether it's expensive to them or not is totally subjective. So you can't pin the blame on collectors for the cost of a game. And for the record, profiting isn't a bad thing. Anyone who sells something wants to make some money on it. I mean, you took the time to buy it, right? And then you kept it and you played it and you kept it safe, and now you're selling it, and you'd like, for your time and effort and for the listing fees and for mailing it and everything, you know, you want something out of it. So making a profit is actually acceptable under these circumstances, and I don't see why anyone would complain about it. Part of the reason we invest in this is because maybe we could turn a profit on it all later. I mean, sure, I collect. A big part of the reason I collect is because I love video game history and I want to own it and I want to preserve it. But if I ever hit rock bottom, it's nice to know that I could turn it around, I could flip it, and I could make some money. So there's nothing wrong with that. So for the argument that collectors make game prices go up or spike or whatever, that's just nonsense. Look, everything has to be owned. If you have a physical, inanimate object and you want to own it, that's fine. If you want to keep it, that's fine. It's yours to do with as you please, but it has to be owned. And there's no shortage of anything really online. Like, if I want Panzer Dragoon Saga, I can go online and find it, even though 1,000 collectors are keeping them in their collection for the next 10 years. The internet is littered with rare games that you can buy and sell whenever you want. It's not like every collector has found every copy and suddenly they're impossible to get. The impossible to get ones were just produced in massively low numbers. So what happened? Their value went up as dictated by the market, and some people are keeping them and they aren't selling as often. But eventually they all sell. If you look up Stadium Events, you can find several copies right now, and that's a pretty rare game, right? And that's it. I just wanted to talk about that. If you have any thoughts on the matter, please do leave a comment. I have to get out of here. I have to open the store and get to work. But I will see you all soon. Like I said before, please like this video if you haven't already. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and hit that bell icon so you'll get updates when I release more videos. And you can follow me on Twitter at L1Games. I'm gone. I will see you all soon. Thanks for watching.